Pangolin Day. Green Dawning takes this day very seriously, given the plight of these beautiful shy creatures. The pangolin is said to be the most trafficked mammal ever, with over 1 million pangolins poached in the last 10 years, leaving them at risk of extinction. The pangolin is a keystone species, which means they're critical to the survival of other creatures and ecosystems. Pangolins play an important role in regulating insect populations, with a single pangolin consuming around 70 million ants and termites each year. Our own Esther Hazen has kindly agreed to chat to us about pangolins and her involvement in protecting them. Hi, Owen, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Bev. Thank you for having me on your website today.
Pleasure. I've got a few questions for you, and I just think that for the audience it'd be great if they could just understand a little bit about what you do and a little bit more about pangolins. Why are pangolins poached?
Bev, primarily they are poached because of their scales. Their scales are largely ground down into traditional medicine, especially for the Asian markets. That's Vietnam in particular, China, that's the biggest market. They actually have shops in China that only sell pangolin products.
Oh.
The other thing that they're also used for, especially in Africa, is for the bushmeat trade. Apparently, you can go up in sort of Central Africa, Northern Africa, and they are considered to be a delicacy. And then, of course, in Asia, they take the fetuses of the baby pangolins and they make a soup. It is very, very expensive. And if you are seen ordering it or you are seen eating it, you get a lot of sort of face, it means that you are a rich and wealthy man. So that is where basically why pangolins are being poached.
That's also a status thing besides the medicinal.
Yes, yeah,
right.
Definitely.
And is there any truth behind the medicinal claims made?
Absolutely not. You might as well tear off your own nails and eat them for the medicinal purposes you're going to get from pangolin scales. There is no documented proof at all of any medicinal benefits. The only problem is that it has been a traditional medicine. And to try and get the people's mindset away from the traditional medicine to more modern medicines, especially in China and also Vietnam, where a lot of the information is state controlled. So to try and get the people from that mindset to a more modern mindset is going to take a huge amount of education. And at the moment, it's not really happening.
Right. Where are the pangolins found? Which regions?
Okay, they're found throughout Africa. At the moment, the biggest pangolin poaching is occurring in Central Africa, and where they're used for the bushmeat trade largely. But now they're also finding out that the value of the pangolin scales is so great. The other area where pangolins are being poached very, very highly at the moment is in Zimbabwe. We are finding most of the pangolins that we actually get, that we manage to, in our sting operations, we are finding that most of the pangolins are coming from Zim.
Wow.
But there are obviously a lot of them are being found. We found one last year in a car parked at Alzu on the way between Middelburg and Dalstrom, and obviously a lot are coming from Kruger as well.
Sure. And can you give us some information about the pangolins' temperaments?
Bev, they're very shy. They are nocturnal. Although we have still got one called Pumpkin who actually likes to feed in the middle of the day, but it's unusual. You usually only see them at night. They are totally and completely and utter ghosts. You will not see them. They live in burrows most of the time, which is problematic because we often have to put telemetry on their back so we can actually find them. And they go down these burrows and they hook their telemetry on the stones or the roots, and they tear the telemetry off, even though it's bolted on. But you don't see them. If you see a pangolin, you are very, very lucky.
Well, then how are they poached then, Iona?
Well, what actually happens is they have got a very, very peculiar scent, like most animals. And poachers train their dogs to actually pick up the scent of the pangolin. And obviously a dog's nose is incredibly, very, very, very strong. So they usually pick up the scent of the pangolins, and that's how they find them.
Right. Okay.
But so when we have a sting operation and we do find the poachers, we actually have to put the dogs down as well, because they will just carry on using the dogs as well, which is a terrible side effect as well. But
absolutely, yeah.
But I just want to just go back. Pangolins are fascinating creatures because the ones that we find in Africa are called temix, African ground pangolins, but they walk on their two back legs, and they've got very long. They've got long claws, obviously, on their front legs that they use to dig out the anthills. So they look like miniature T-Rexes when they walk. But like I say, nobody has seen them, so nobody knows what they're like.
Right.
But we've had, if they are like Pumpkin, if we woke her up and she wasn't ready to be woken up, she would often swish her tail. Now, the scales are very, very sharp. When you pick up a pangolin, you usually have to use a towel or a blanket because you can be quite badly cut by their scales.
Right.
And we had another one called, well, we still got him, MP Slasher. And also he could get a bit grumpy. But usually if the handler puts them down amongst a group of people, say, they will actually go up to the people and sort of sniff them out a bit like a little dog, you know.
Wow.
And very curious, but they are really the sweetest animals. And of course, their only defense is to curl up in a ball, which makes it easier for the poachers just to pick them up and carry them out.
Oh, it's tragic. Absolutely tragic.
Absolutely.
And how are you involved in protecting the pangolins?
Okay, I got involved with the pangolins about 2 years ago. I belonged to a group called Friends of Loskop, and it's a small it's a small nature reserve, and we had just finished rhino poaching, and Delisha Gunn, who's the one of the managers there, she came and she said to me, Iona, I've got a surprise for you. And she took me to a hut, and they let out matet. And so it was the first time in my life I've ever seen a pangolin. And all Matet wanted to do was to go and forage. He wanted to go and find his ants for supper. So had spent quite a bit of time with him. And then after that, we've been involved with all the pangolins that have been, when they get caught and they get sent to Pretoria, to a very special place called the African Pangolin Working Group. And there they've got a brilliant vet. And what she does is she keeps them for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then she finds release sites for them. But usually they are so compromised that they often cannot be released back into the wild, or they die. They do not have very strong hearts. So often the trauma that they've gone through, or the dehydration that they've gone through, and you can't force feed them to eat. They only like to forage. You can't, it's not very easy to actually, you can't put a whole lot of ants in their cage. They won't eat. They do drink quite readily. It's quite amazing. Their tongue is the same length as their body. So if you give them a little dog's bowl of water, they actually churn it into like a froth. It's actually quite amazing, but they're usually so compromised that they they do actually die. So,
Right.
but the ones that can be released, obviously, are being released. So,
Right.
yeah.
So only your organization is protecting those that have been rescued, in a sense.
Yes, these are the ones that have actually been found to be fit and healthy and ready to go back into the wild, and
Right.
they're released. We monitor them for about 6 months. Some of them, what we do is they've got usually 2 tracking devices. One is a VHF with, and the other one is usually satellite. So we can actually monitor where they've tracked to and where they've walked to, because they walk long distances. But like I say, usually the battery only lasts 6 months. So then we stop monitoring them like that. But we find them, we weigh them. We often in the winter months, we might give them some water. But we keep the handling to a bare minimum.
Right.
We don't like them to become dependent on humans in any way. They are wild animals, and they must remain wild animals.
And are there anti-poaching units that are like with rhinos? Are there organizations out there who are really trying to prevent the poaching?
There are a lot of them. I've only worked with the one group, the African Pangolin Working Group. It's run by Professor Ray Jensen. He is absolutely brilliant, and he has got such an amazing passion for pangolins. But obviously, each telemetry, I know, because I've just had to try and raise money for one that MP Slasher lost, and it costs, one telemetry costs 25,000.
Yeah.
And it only lasts 6 months, the battery.
Wow.
So it is expensive. And to track them, the one day Pumpkin had lost her satellite tracking device, so we had to rely on the VHF, which means you've got to be within so many meters of her. So we hunted nearly, I'd say probably about 6 hours until we found her. So it can be difficult. That's what I was saying.
But how does the tracking actually help? So I mean, would the cost of those little, I'll just call them little cameras that are, or tracking devices, should I say, putting on their scales, could that cost rather be put to in terms of anti-poaching, or does the tracking really assist to protect those ones that you've already rehabilitated?
I think it should. You have to track them, because we had one called Goblin. What had happened was she had been put in a tin of green paint and hidden in the boot of the people's car, the poacher's car. So even though they gave her a full, they said, no, she's fine, and we released her into the wild, she actually only lasted a couple of weeks, and then she died of heart failure. So, and if we hadn't had the telemetry, we wouldn't have known where she had gone to. If she didn't have the telemetry, we wouldn't have known that she'd actually died, because obviously especially the satellite, it just becomes stationary. So then you know, okay, and then you've lost about 50,000 per animal. Both telemetry sets gone. To go for anti-poaching, like I say, most of it's done now in Zim, and they're just finding that the ports are easier to come through South Africa. So you can, but also you don't really know where they are being, where they're operating from. It's they found all over Africa. I mean, they found in Namibia, they found in Kalahari, they found in Kruger, they found all over. It's just too wide an area. And also, because they're ghosts, nobody knows how many there are left, and nobody knows how many there are in a particular area. Right. So to try and concentrate in an area becomes very, very problematic.
Right. I mean, do you see any light at the end of the tunnel? I mean, one of the questions I had here was like, well, how can people get involved? Obviously, the more people that get involved and, there's that transparency and people understand what the issues are, and funding, of course, would help. So, I mean, you can answer that question, but do you see any light at the end of the tunnel? Do you see any changes? I mean, would education help? That's something else. But if we had to put that in a nutshell, how do you see this kind of the situation improving?
You know what, Bev? I always say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And I say there are a lot of people that are trying to make the general populace more aware of the plight of pangolins and trying to stop the bushmeat trade in sort of Central Africa and North Africa. The other problem also is that, unfortunately, when pangolins find an electric fence, they get a shock from it, and what their immediate reaction is to do is to curl into a ball. And so there are so many pangolins in South Africa that are being killed by electric fences. So I'm saying it is always education. Get it out to the schools. What is a pangolin? Why do we need to protect them? How do we protect them? We've got to get better electric fences. There are products out there that the bottom strands of wire are not electrified, so that if a pangolin does go through the fence, it's not going to be killed.
Right.
Get involved with the African Pangolin Working Group. Like I said, it's the only one that I've actually been involved in, but they are wonderful, absolutely wonderful team. Obviously, they need money for the telemetries. They need money for to get it out there to the farmers with electric fences, and also to supply research gear. That's the major sort of costs that, as well as to rehabilitate, because remember, these pangolins come in. What they sometimes do is they show us videos of how they have mistreated the pangolins. The pangolin rolls into a ball, so they show us videos of them using the pangolin as a soccer ball, and they kick them around a room. Like I said, Goblin was put in a green paint tin. The abuse is terrible. And then what they do is they sometimes send us an email and they say, if you pay us so much money, we will release the pangolin to you.
Sure.
So there's always this demand for pangolin, for the pangolin rehabilitations, because remember, you can't force feed a pangolin. So you've got to have minders, and the minders have got to take them out every afternoon or early morning, and they have got a sort of a field that someone has kindly donated to them, and they walk the pangolins every day, because the pangolin will only walk by foraging.
Right. So I mean that there's a huge cost to every aspect of trying to protect and rehabilitate the pangolins. But if I had to go one step further and say, if there was, and there may be education in Asia to say, guys, actually, there's no medicinal benefit to using the scales, for instance, for medicine. I mean, the soup is obviously a different story, but do you think that there's a possibility that with less demand, just out of Asia for starters, that the pangolins would be, better protected? And then secondly, obviously for the bushmeat, do you see any possibilities of any of that improving?
I do. There's an actress in China called Angela Baby, or that's her sort of her pseudonym. She goes under that. She is very, very loud about the plight of pangolins and the fact that they carry no medicinal purpose whatsoever. So she is our biggest ambassador in China at the moment, Angela Baby. Fantastic. And she is doing a lot.
Right.
But these are centuries of traditional medicine. It's going to be a hard task, but I do think that we are making a difference. One of our prosecutors in Middelburg has actually, he got the highest sentence for a pangolin poacher. The poacher got 11 years.
Wow.
So I think, look, Prof. Ray, he spends a lot of time in court, obviously giving evidence and whatever. But I think if we can increase it to a life sentence, which I don't think they'll go for, but I think the police are at least working with us now. So
that's good.
There is hope at the end of the tunnel.
I think for me, what's upsetting is, beside the fact that, you know, they could become extinct and they're so important, you know, to our environment and our economy. But what they endure, you know, I mean, some of that which you have described, I mean, they feel pain, and they just, you know, go through an enormous amount of trauma, and that's very distressing. And you know, it's the same with all poaching. It's absolutely horrible. So I don't know if you'd like to just maybe end off with, if there's anything you'd like to you know, state, you know, a closing statement and a plea. What we'll also do is we'll give the details for you know, the African Pangolin Group for donations. If people want to donate, we'll give that information as well.
Super, thanks, Bev. Yeah, 97 tons of pangolin scales, that's excluding the meat, just the scales, were seized last year, which is about 150,000 pangolins.
Yeah.
And we say this is only 20% of what is actually being poached per year. So you times that by 5, it's a huge amount of animals that are being poached. The condition that we get that the working group get the pangolins in is so distressing. You actually cannot believe. They often, if they are pregnant, their fetus will have died or had been aborted. It takes a lot of rehabilitation, up to 6 months per pangolin, depending on the state that they've been brought in. It is. They say that in Asia there are no pangolins left. So the Asian pangolin is already extinct, and I think the African pangolin is on its way out.
Right.
And it is for no reason other than a non-existent medicinal purpose. I just think it is the saddest thing that I've ever heard. It's for nothing. People not going to have their fevers reduced by a pangolin scale.
Absolutely. So, take a Bernardo.
Yeah, take a Bernardo.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's great work that you're doing, and I just want to thank you on behalf of Green Dawning and myself personally. You know, there's just, thank goodness, there are people like you out there who do care, and you know, all the effort, the money, the emotions, all that stuff that goes into what you do is just, you know, pretty mind-blowing, and I just wanted to say, you know, a very big thank you from me and from Green Dawning, and I'm sure on behalf of those who watch this podcast.
Okay, super. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot. Hey.
Okay.
Hey,
Bye-bye now.
Take care. Bye.